Welcome to the 8th episode of the Invisible Iconic podcast, Larby versus Norway. Today I am very excited and very grateful to have Elisabeth Raasholm Larby. She is 2 hours out of Oslo in Norway, and she has the unique story of having sued the Norwegian government as a result of her endometriosis diagnosis delay. So, Elisabeth, so lovely to meet you. Welcome to the Invisible Iconic podcast.
Thank you so much. So nice to be here.
So, Elisabeth, walk us through your journey with endometriosis.
I was diagnosed with endometriosis when I was 28. I got the diagnosis adenomyosis when I was 29, so 1 year later. And when I first got my endometriosis diagnosis, I was diagnosed with mild degree, which was wrong. And under a year after, I was diagnosed with the severe degree of endometriosis. It started when I was 13 years old, had my first period, and it was really painful. A lot of heavy bleeding. My period lasted for maybe up to 10 days. So my mom took me to the doctor when I was 13 years old, and we were told that it wasn't anything wrong. Some women just have heavy periods and a lot of pain, and that I had to learn to live with pain. And I started on birth control when I was 14 years old and changed the birth control a lot of times because it didn't have any effect and it made me bleed all the time. But I didn't get any other help. I didn't get referred to a gynecologist. And I didn't realize it was something wrong since he told me it was normal. So I tried to live with the pain as good as I could. And I actually got like something I could bring to school, and they would delete the 10 days that I had sick days. So I would have less on my final report. So I did get believed, but I didn't get any help. So I changed doctor after some years when I moved to Hamar. And that doctor, he insinuated that it was psychological. He told me that I was thinking too much on my stomach. He said I should think less about it, and all my focus on my stomach made it hurt more. So I always went out of the doctor's appointment feeling really bad. And it got to a point where I had so much pain when I had to poop under menstruation, so I had to like bite my arm or almost faint it because it was so painful, and still I didn't get any help. But finally, I was referred to a gynecologist after I was pushing that, and then the gynecologist said isn't normal. You have to go to the local hospital, and they did a laparoscopy, and they found small amounts of endometriosis. Said it couldn't be, my pain couldn't be caused by the endometriosis, and not really any more help. So I got a member of the Norwegian Endometriosis Association, and I had some information, and I started to read more and more about endometriosis, and I realized that, okay, maybe the help I've gotten isn't optimal. Maybe I should and try to get help elsewhere. And so I went to a meeting where a specialist in endometriosis was talking about deep endometriosis. So it was like he was talking about me really when he described the symptoms. And so I got the opportunity to talk to him for a couple of minutes after he held the presentation. And he told me that I should go to someone who's more specialist in endometriosis. And I asked, can I come to you? If I can get my doctor to refer me to you, will I get in? And he said, yeah, you can write that I said that you should come to me. So I got my doctor to refer me there, and I had an appointment there only 1 month after an appointment at the local hospital. And with the specialist, he found deep endometriosis. He found endometriosis in my bowel. I was close to full blockage 2 places, in my rectum and higher up. So I had to do 2 more surgeries at the specialist. What he found was nothing like what they found in the local hospital, and I was only like 11 months after my first surgery. So it was a totally different story, and a little bit fast forward. I had 2 kids, luckily, and I've had a hysterectomy because of adenomyosis. And then they discovered I had endometriosis on my diaphragm. I had a new surgery with a thorax surgeon and the gynecologist, and they went into my thorax, and then they found a hole in my diaphragm so they could see my liver from the thorax, and they also found endometriosis on my lung. So I had to remove a small part of my lung. And it was like they took a paintbrush and like splattered endometriosis all over my lung, but they couldn't remove everything. So that's like the story. And when I discovered that I had so much more endometriosis than was found at the local hospital, in Norway you can send in an application to get like compensation if you had like not good treatment in the public hospital. So I tried to do that. Didn't get anything, so I tried again. I appealed as many times as I could until I couldn't appeal it more times without going to court. So that's where it all started. I decided to take the government of Norway to court.
I think what's really important that we highlight straight off the bat, you have talked about some really difficult presentations of endometriosis that certainly require more than a gynecologist, more than the birth control pills you or I or anybody else are put on and were put on and will continue to be put on, because the endometriosis guidelines around the world push for a first line treatment with these sorts of medications and these primarily contraceptive medicines. And then the second tier, of course, involves things like GnRH analogs. So please tell us more, if you can, in your own words, about the court case and as much detail as you can. You mentioned that you tried compensation first because it was through the public system, some of these, surgeries. Now, obviously, a caveat to those listening at home and watching at home, this is very dependent on the Norwegian, system of, government, politics, legal system, all of the above. So it will be very different in each country. This is certainly not a how to sue your government for your endometriosis delayed diagnosis episode, but with that, I will say that you are pioneering, and any information that you give myself and our listeners today who might find themselves in the same boat, you're more than a wealth of knowledge and would be more than helpful. So please walk us through the legalities. How did you get there? Did you first see a lawyer? How did it all start?
Well, I wish I had contacted a lawyer much sooner, because the system you can ask for compensation from says it's a very easy process. You just have to send in your information, and then they will evaluate it and give you a response. But my experience is that it wasn't easy at all, and that I should have had a lawyer to help me already then. But anyway, to be able to get a compensation, because endometriosis is a chronic disease, and I would have had endometriosis either way, even if I would get good health care in Norway. So it has to be an injury or something like that because of the delayed diagnosis. And in my case, I have nerve damage in my pelvic. Yeah. Anyway, and that's one of the things I can ask for compensation from. But for me, it was like you have specialists writing and like a letter, or what should I call it, like evaluation of your case. In Norway, we call it Norsk pasientskadeerstatning. It's where you can search from compensation. So I appealed to the Norwegian body for an compensation. And to get compensation, you have to have injury. Because endometriosis is like, it's a chronic disease, so that itself doesn't give you the right to compensation. But if the healthcare has been so poor that you've got an injury or something else, then you can appeal for compensation. And the Norwegian body, they use specialists to evaluate your case. and they write a declaration or like a letter uh, with saying what they mean about the case. And I saw in my case that the specialists had wrong information about endometriosis. And this was a specialist that's quite into the field. It said like endometriosis could develop from mild to severe in under a year. And so because of that, there wasn't any damage done to me. So I knew that this was so wrong, and I tried to appeal. I was sending research to them, and they just told me, we decide what we read, we decide what we're gonna evaluate in this case, and they are like putting all the focus to the specialist letter. So I was really frustrated, and I was thinking, because at that time I was sitting in the Norwegian Endometriosis Association as a board member. So I had a lot of information about endometriosis. And I thought, like, if it's so difficult for me, how is it for a patient with not who doesn't have access to the same information? And I got really frustrated because it's not only about my case. I felt like my case was pushed towards the court system. And so I appealed all the times I could, and until it finally wasn't anything else to do than to take it to court. And I was a bit unsure because you have a big economic risk doing this. I had some friends who decided to start like a GoFundMe. We don't have but similar here in Norway, and some money was gathered, and I decided to contact a lawyer. And he looked at my case and helped me to sue the Norwegian government. And that felt like really big to do, because like, oh my God, the Norwegian government, it sounds so big, but I guess it is. And we couldn't find any other case about endometriosis in the Norwegian court system. So this was the first. It was like a long process because I sued the Norwegian government in the beginning of 2023, and it all happened in September, and I got the verdict in the beginning of November. So it was a bit heavy sitting in court, of course, because well, I've been very open about my story. I've been sharing it in media. So for me, my medical history isn't too sensitive for me. I shared it all basically, but I knew that they would take maybe some things that's not relevant for endometriosis and bring it up in court. So I was prepared for it, and they did. And they're trying to twist and turn everything to their side. And it's really like when I said before that my story isn't so unique, I'm thinking about the fact that you're not being believed in the health system. And it was a bit the same sitting in court, having, the lawyer of the state, of the government, like twisting and turning everything, and hearing specialists from the government side saying wrong things about endometriosis and twisting and turning it to their side. So that was difficult. So the first day for me was the heaviest, because that was the first day where I had to listen to this. It was better the second and the third day, but it was heavy. And I was sitting there thinking, how is this with much heavier cases, more sensitive cases? If it's so heavy for me with my medical history out there anyway. But it was a strange situation, but I had other specialists talking, like a neutral specialist in court, supporting my case basically. And it took about a month after the court to get the verdict, and I was really happy because I won on everything. I didn't sue the medical places, but I had a complaint about two doctors and one local hospital, and they didn't do the right. How can I say it? In Norway, we call it god medisinsk praxis, so it's like good medical practice, basically. And so that's the verdict, that none of those places had good medical practice in my case. So that was a really big relief, and it felt to me, it's not so important about what I will get in a compensation. It's like the fact that it wasn't right. and it's not right for so many women. And there's so few that can go to court, that can sue the government because you have the financial risk. So it was so important for me to just have on paper that what happened to me wasn't right. But the government most likely will appeal the verdict. They have about 1 more week now. So I'm just waiting to get an email or a call from my lawyer saying, yeah, the appeal came and I have to go like higher in court. So I just have to wait and see. But anyway, I think like this first verdict is really important and it's like a big win, not only for me, but everyone involved and everyone like supporting me. And yeah.
So, firstly, congratulations on somehow finding all of that strength to sit in court, no less, which would be such an intimidating environment in general. To me, it just sounds like David and Goliath, that this is what this story is. David is Elisabeth, and we are all David. They brought in these specialists, and it was you against them, you versus them. I don't know who the judge was, but I am applauding the judge, because to see through these systemic injustices and to say, actually, no, something unjust has been perpetrated here and this person deserves compensation and it wasn't all in her head. Now, I will make notice of the fact that obviously endometriosis primarily affects women. We know mainly about women of reproductive age, but as we know, it's been found in fetuses, it's been found post-hysterectomy, post-menopause, it's been found in both intersex people and even in cases of men in literature, right? So it isn't just a women's disease, but of course we fight these battles often in the dark under the umbrella of women's health. So think about, other people potentially of other, sexual orientations, gender, whatever, all of the above, not just nationalities, because you would have other countries whose court systems would be, potentially more corrupt or, things like that. So there are so many systemic, when we say systemic, we're not only talking about the court system, legal system in general, the medical system, like there are so many different systems in which we find ourselves as patients, as David, and we're fighting all these Goliaths. And there you were, not only fighting, the Goliath that is even just the specialist that you named, in your court case, but also the Norwegian government, because as you've mentioned, you have the public, a lot of this was happening in the public system. So is that why you were able to sue the government specifically, because this was in the public system?
Yeah, exactly. Because the body is under the government. So when I first applied for the compensation to the like lowest organ, and then I had to appeal, and it's like the stairs up, and then finally goes to the court system. And when you have going to the court system, it's like the appeals body is under the government. I didn't sue the hospital. I didn't sue the doctors, of course, because I'm not about to punish anyone. I just wanted to get better for the people who comes after me, and the people who's living with endometriosis now. But those health professionals weren't in the court actually. So it was like just from the specialists from the appeal body. But I also had specialists with me who talked on behalf of my case. But I knew when they were brought in, they were neutral. They wouldn't like talk just to build my case. They would talk from a medical professional point of view. And that's where I felt the difference was between the specialist who witnessed on my behalf and the specialist who witnessed on the government's behalf. And that was a bit sad to see because maybe it's naive of me to believe, but I just thought that healthcare professionals had more truth to their profession, and that was a bit like sad to see. And they actually talking down everything we're working for in Norway. Also, what was a bit special in my case was that my medical journal was a bit. My first doctor didn't do a good job with writing down what was going on in the appointments, and I was a bit. I didn't know how the patient's legal right was versus the government's legal right was, and that was the maybe interesting thing after the court was finished to wait for the verdict. How will they evaluate the whole thing? And although the government was like twisting and turning everything, I also felt like it was obvious in the court that I was talking the truth. So it was a bit like, it was really strange sitting there with people, like it was an undertone of people knowing I was saying the truth, but we didn't know how the legal rights were in all of this. So I'm really happy because if this verdict gets to stand, then we have the patient's rights in order, which is very important. But I also discovered a lot of like things about the system that's not good. Obviously, how I feel like my whole case was pushed towards the court, and yeah, it's not a good process and it's not an easy process, and you sort of have to be healthy to be sick. It shouldn't be like that. When you have had a bad experience in the public healthcare system, you shouldn't have another bad experience in the appeals body and the court system. You shouldn't have to do that. And so I think that's such a shame. And I also think it's such a shame if the government now appeals the verdict, then it's like they it's all about it. I find it so basic because it's about that women have the right for good healthcare. And which other disease would this be okay? I just can't see that. So yeah.
You mentioned how you found it really difficult to come to terms with all the deception that you saw happen in the courtroom, and deception even about endometriosis facts. You would think in today's day and age, with all of the information we have at our disposal, that fact would prevail. But as we know, especially in endometriosis, there's a lot of misinformation that gets placed front and center. And you have these experts that are touting complete misinformation, such as retrograde menstruation is the main and only reason that endometriosis occurs. But as we know, the founding father of the retrograde menstruation theory causing endo theory was John Sampson, who in 1928 said himself that this theory doesn't explain extrapelvic endometriosis, outside of reproductive years, etc. Okay, and obviously in men, fetuses, etc. Because if you haven't menstruated yet, then how can you have it in a fetus, etc. And even if retrograde menstruation affects, quite a large percentage of us, that still doesn't explain so many aspects of the disease. And yes, we know it's at least 50% genetic, according to actual Australian studies over the last 3 decades. We know a lot of different things about the disease, but somehow misinformation seems to reign supreme, and it seems bolstered by a lot of companies. It seems bolstered by businesses, international corporations that have a lot of money invested into them, and that have a lot of shareholders that don't really care whether we get fantastic healthcare or not. Because if 80% of us are happy with our pills, with our, contraceptive pills or whatever, then who cares about the other 20%, right? Or as a spokesperson for the Royal and Australian New Zealand College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, which is the body in Australia that trains our surgeons, said that endometriosis, firstly, that my story was sad, but in their practice, they only encounter extrapelvic endometriosis in 1% of their patients, even though we know at least 3.7 to up to 40% of endometriosis patients have extrapelvic endometriosis, specifically bowel endo. So bowel endo is the most common presentation. So how is that possible? Like every time that person is either ablating, most likely ablating or excising lesions outside of the reproductive organs, whether it's, uterosacral ligaments or the ureter or the bowel or whatever else, if they're even touching it, then they are dealing with, whether it's on their bladder or whatever, you're dealing it. You're seeing it. You're seeing us. And I know that you're seeing us. So even if that figure is correct, and later on they went on to say, we don't actually know We don't actually know the figures, but it doesn't matter what the figures are. If people like you and me exist, and before I went through all my surgeries, I was working in radio, I was working in universities, I was working for the Human Rights Commission, which was, part of the Australian government, like it's a body under the Attorney General's department. So I was living that life, and now I am on a total and permanent disablement benefit myself. Right? So it's a very long winded, I don't even know where I'm going with this, but it's very long winded. What you've gone through is exceptional. Yes, deception happens in the medical system in general, but specifically in endometriosis care, because there's so many outside influences when it comes to this. This isn't just me and the doctor and these villainous doctors that are after, like, no, that's not it. They're literally not trained correctly. They're literally fed misinformation all the way from university onwards, and even earlier than that, because in high school and primary school, they'll hear it's normal to have painful periods, whether they are a man and their sister or their mother or their auntie or their whatever is going through it. It is insidious, and it infiltrates every misinformation about endometriosis, infiltrates every aspect of our life. So it isn't surprising this deception occurs. And finally, I just wanted to say that Hippocratic oath of do no harm, it's impossible in today's day and age. If you yourself as the physician or doctor or surgeon don't get the correct information, or even if 10% of information is obscured, that 10% could be life-changing for someone like us. So, again, I applaud you for, having I don't even know what you'd call it, ferocity with which to fight the misinformation in a court of law. In a court of law. And the fact that you said, you're on the board of, the Endometriosis Association over there in Norway, you know what you're talking about. Yes, you're a patient, and you might be an expert patient, as one of our expert surgeons in Australia called us, specifically relating to the Change the Guidelines movement, and the information that we're repeating, because it's correct information, not misinformation like what they're saying on our national broadcaster that I used to work for, etc. So where do we go from here? If we're living in this deceptive medical system, then how can patients, in your experience, both as a patient and within the association that you've been on the board of, how can patients, whether, because we've got to admit not everyone's going to have the finances, not everybody's going to have there's a lot of obstacles that can get in the way. And like you said, you have to be healthy to be sick, or at least healthy of mind to be able to cope with something that you don't get taught about in school or growing up. Like, hey, one day you're going to go to a doctor. Yes, those people that are meant to heal you and help you, and you're never going to be the same again. And then nobody's going to believe you for a really long time. And then you're going to have to somehow get up out of the abyss and put on some sort of armor and then face all these deception and lies, and let's get really colorful without phrasing, and demons and everything else, because that's what it is. We're not exaggerating. So how have you found the strength through all this, and what support have you leaned on, and what would you advise other endometriosis patients, whether they're going through on a smaller scale, just trying to get their general practitioner to believe them, or whether they're, going to follow your lead and say, actually, I'm going to potentially try to go down this route. So what's your advice for them?
Well, I had obviously, after a lot of years not knowing what was wrong with me, because I had like an inner conflict sort of, because I was told everything was normal, and at at the end of it, I was so sick I couldn't do anything. I got like pains. It was like giving birth. I've given birth to two children now, so now I know that the pain was similar. But it was, I was so sick, and when I then got the confirmation that, you know what, you have a severe degree of endometriosis, and your bowel is almost full and of endometriosis, 2 places, and you have to remove parts of your bowel. I was like, I felt so relieved. Nobody wants to be sick. Nobody wants to have a severe degree of endometriosis, but to have that confirmation was a big relief. But then also I had to go through a lot of surgeries, and almost became my sickness, if I can say it like that. It was like, yeah, I wasn't healthy enough to do anything else. I wasn't healthy enough to get out of my house. So it was like my sickness became my comfort, sort of. And so I realized that I had to seek someone to talk to about all of this, to talk to about the inner conflict and to process everything that I've been going through. And that helped me a lot. And when I had like processed everything, felt like I was a bit more on top of my, not necessarily physical, but psychological. Then I decided to be involved in the Endometriosis Association, because it was really important for me to put all the negative into something positive. So to work to make a change, that was really, really important to me. So I think my advice would be, first of all, try to, if you need someone to talk to, do it, because it can be really, really helpful and make you process things and make you find out what's important for you to have a good life and all of that stuff. And then if you have the energy and if you have a case where you think, I want to um, appeal or I want to try to get a compensation or something like this, then I would absolutely recommend to contact a lawyer and to help them look at your case to see, do you have a case? Is it worth taking to the court, or should you just let it be? Because my lawyer was really honest with me. He was like, yeah, if you have a weak case, we're not going to take it to court. It's that would not be a smart idea. And he was all the way like telling me where my case stood. He can never be like guaranteed. He can't say, oh, you're going to win. But like, do we have something to bring to court or not? Because we're not just going to go to court to go to court. So to find that person to help you also. And I just want to support what you're saying about like the whole system, that what the misinformation and everything, because I don't think any doctor, any healthcare professional want to treat their patients bad. There's, well, at least not most of them. And I think it's what you're saying about it's the misinformation, and also for some doctors, of course, it's the attitude towards women. That's of course a problem, especially with my second doctor, and we are in contact with so many people who tells us about bad attitude with your doctor. But I don't think any doctor deliberately would want to mistreat their patient, like medical. So it's like we have to make a change, and that's what's really engaging for me in the Norwegian Endometriosis Association, because we've been working very much towards the politicians in Norway, and finally we managed to get them to listen. And wasn't it in Australia where the health minister said, "I'm sorry"?
That is correct. You're talking about Greg Hunt, and yes, I believe it was 2017, where he apologized to endometriosis sufferers because systemically we have been not helped, right? Yeah. He apologized because we all are going through so much. And yes, now, unfortunately, for those of us playing at home, a lot of the people and organizations, and I won't get even more specific, that were part of that apology are also the same people that were sort of involved in the National Action Plan and other things that sound really fantastic on paper. We have the world's first endometriosis action plan, but as we know, even from the mouth of the same RANZCOG, Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Obstetrician and Gynaecologist spokesperson I was talking about earlier, the National Action Plan didn't identify endometriosis excision training as something that is important for people in Australia, even though we know, and I'm sure you will agree, that endometriosis excision surgery is literally the only thing we have, the closest thing we have to getting rid of the disease. We know it does come back and can, and that there's recurrence. But in Australia, we're being told recurrence rates are between 50 and 80%. Now, in world-class interdisciplinary expert excision surgical centers where the surgeons are doing high volume of surgery, where they're doing, for example, 2 bowel resections a week as opposed to 2 a year, as some of our experts are doing, okay, they're seeing completely different things happen when people have excision, right? They're seeing quality of life improved, and yes, there's endometriosis recurrence in 10%, let's say, right? As some people have a lot less even than that. But we're taking into consideration that endometriomas recur the most often, and if you still have ovaries, obviously you might get recurrence of endometriomas, right? But especially if we're talking about deep infiltrating endometriosis, if we're talking about using a team, so you have, as you mentioned with your rectum, you have colorectal surgeon present, and not only present, but they've worked on these sorts of cases before with endometriosis excision surgeons, and they're present and working in unison, not just having the cardiothoracic surgeon, for example, on the lungs, but he's never seen those presentations of endometriosis before, right? So it is a joke that people like you and me, those that experience this and experience having to become an expert, because otherwise you're literally, no exaggeration, like there have been people who have died as a result of delayed diagnosis, as a result of side effects of things, as a result of, choosing to unalive because they can't handle the life that they're living in this system, even in first world countries like Australia, even in, and may they rest in peace, because it's unfair that I'm hearing of 20-year-olds and things like that, This is, I don't know what other disease has this. I know that there's other diseases where people, and especially women, experience gaslighting. I know that about a lot of comorbidities, but endometriosis is so unique in that sense because you've got at least 200 million of us worldwide. And gosh, they make a pretty penny off us, Elisabeth.
I know and it's so sad. And what was a bit interesting also when I was in the court was that we could see back on because we don't have like national guidelines, but we have other guidelines. And they were quite clear on endometriosis back when I was 13 years old, 14 years old, 18 years old. So there was a lot right information because it didn't go too deep into everything. So there was enough that they should have been able to think, oh, this can be endometriosis, or I should refer this patient to a gynecologist. So there was enough information, because that was also like a big thing during my court case. That things are better now and it wasn't so good then, so we couldn't expect medical practice to be at the level that it is today. So that was like a big discussion, but we have evidence that there was a lot of medical books and stuff about endometriosis back then. But what's really like uplifting in Norway, and this will take time, of course, this will take a lot of time, but we, inspired by the Australian health minister, we were having a debate on national TV with the health minister in Norway, and we like said, well, the health minister in Australia, he apologized, and then he actually had to apologize to the Norwegian women for the same thing. And then we got a meeting with him afterwards, and we were able to explain the situation for our patients. He started some work to evaluate what we need for the endometriosis patients. So we, in the Norwegian Endometriosis Association, we were in this group looking on what we have to do to make things better, and a national competence center was one of it, and also national guidelines were one of it. So the competence center, it opened in October, and we in that competence center we have health professionals from every part of Norway, and they're sitting in this group and trying to find a standard for the treatment. They're going to be coursing doctors and stuff like this, and that's what's good in Norway, because the people that's in front of endometriosis in the medical profession, they are quite skilled. They are really engaged. They are like wanting to do better for the patients. And so I do believe that it could be good, but then again, it's all about how much funding they get from the government and stuff like this. So um, that's one thing. And also, we're sitting in the work with the national guidelines, which of course won't be as detailed as we need, but hopefully it will be so detailed that general practitioner knows when to refer a patient to a gynecologist knows when to refer to hospital, and the gynecologist at the hospital knows when to refer to a more specialized hospital. And that's what we need for the guidelines, because we can't expect everyone to, do advanced surgery, because as you said, it you have to have skill, you have to done some certain amount of surgeries, but they have to know what they see. They have to be able to find endometriosis and to realize this is too much for me. I'm going to close the patient and refer the patient to another hospital. So like this is the things that's hopefully going to get smoother in Norway. And like it's really engaging to be involved in that work, and to also see that we have so many doctors who's so positive and really want to make a change for the endometriosis patients. Of course, there are doctors in Norway also with like still bad attitude, misinformation and stuff like this. And I think I can't speak for the specialists who were witnessing in court for the government, but I got the feeling that they were more focused on building the government's case than they were to talk medically right. So I'm not sure if they believe what they said themselves or if they were just trying to build a case. We do see like positive changes in Norway, but we also know that it's going to take years and years and years to, do the training.
So you mentioned so many interesting things in your last response, Elisabeth, and one thing that really sticks out to me is how you said all these experts, the neutral experts that eventually helped your case because they had facts about endometriosis. They themselves said, even back when you were 13, 14, whatever, there was more correct information at least readily available, and it wasn't so tainted with all these different, influenced opinions. And that strikes me very similar to in Australia, which kind of leads us to the topic of the guidelines as well. Congratulations, by the way. Fantastic work. It's very inspiring to hear that someone who knows what they're talking about, both because they have gone through it themselves, but also they have the right information, right, is going to be involved in such an important thing. So for those who don't know, each country might have something that looks like an endometriosis guideline. In America, in the United States, they have something called an endometriosis bulletin. It hasn't been updated for a long, long time. I think it's over a decade. And in Australia, we have a guideline. Our endometriosis guideline is based on the NICE guideline in the UK. The NICE guideline has been recently updated, but the endometriosis guideline in Australia got updated after the European Society for Human Reproduction and Embryology got updated a couple of years back. And basically, the way it read to me was it's a push away from surgery. It's a push away from laparoscopy as gold standard. We're not even talking specifically about excision here. And so in Australia, the context of guidelines is very different to what you're talking about here, which is starting from scratch with correct information, with advocates at the table and front and center, and with experts front and center that do know what they're talking about, and they're not just selected an expert working group like we have in Australia. Maybe there's more influence by these, just going to say, pharmaceutical companies and things like that, who find it, in their interest to keep giving me this pill. Now it's called this. Now it's got a little bit of a different thing. Now it's a nasal spray instead. Even though some of these medications, such as when it comes to, Lupron and things like that. You know, they've been in Supreme Court, you know, hearings that there's been falsified trials that have come out, you know, in the public arena. Like these things, I'm not specifically only talking about Lupron here. You know, there's class action lawsuits. There's a lot of things. There's survivor groups on Facebook for these medications, you know, and all of this gets hidden. All of this gets hidden because it's not palatable to selling the next new and improved pill, IUD, whatever you want, right? Whatever non-invasive. And we would love non-invasive if it actually did more than just mask. So why do you think, from obviously I've told you what I think about this shift and why I think, especially now, like for example, Australia is hosting the World Congress for Endometriosis, and perhaps I can be as direct as saying that one of the people I've mentioned in my stories today on this podcast is going to be front and center at this World Congress for Endometriosis. And, you know, these people get a platform and we get called hysterical Karens. So why do you think, why the patients that are actually living with this disease, so why do you think that there's been this shift from, you know, let's say 20 years ago to now? What do you as a patient and also as someone on the board of an endometriosis organization, what do you see? What has changed and why do you think it's changed? And if you can talk about your experience with what you know of the guidelines as well, even if it's just about Norway.
Well, Norway is, first of all, a much smaller country. It's been a lot of focus on women's health and endometriosis in the media, and also the Norwegian Endometriosis Association has been in front of this, and we've been addressing publicly things that haven't been good with the system and how things been like ablation, excision, etc. We've been like addressing publicly the quality of the healthcare. So our politicians haven't been prioritizing women health and endometriosis and adenomyosis, and we've been having a big focus on that, and we're not there yet, but they're actually now they can see it, they can understand the issue. We've been putting up numbers of how much this cost the Norwegian government each year, and that gave that made the politicians wake up a little bit, because they see that by investing in this, it will actually be maybe become better. They can save money, and they can, if things get more productive, if you get a better healthcare system, if the patients gets help earlier, maybe they can work, they can contribute to the with the taxes and everything like this. And I also think in Norway that the pharmaceutical companies and everything like this is a bit more regulated than it is in maybe some other countries. And since you have the public healthcare and the way we pay a lot of our salary as taxes, so you can get free medical healthcare. And I think the system in Norway is built in a way that you can't benefit so much that by doing this or this or this, that things are much more regulated, and it's basically in the public healthcare you get your medical help. And some people go to private healthcare. I think it's regulated a little bit, and the system is a little bit different organized in Norway. And all of this together with more public information about endometriosis, we have healthcare professionals who's really involved and engaged, who's also gone to media, writing articles, and being really engaged in this. It makes like a positive shift in Norway. But we also do know that it takes time, and we also do know that we get reactions from healthcare professionals that thinking it's like too much, we're having too much focus on it now. Everyone will think they have endometriosis and we're scaring people, and so it's a little bit of conflict, but it's like I think the people involved in the guidelines and all of this are on the same page. They all know what they want to do. They know how we want it. So it's about more like getting the government on board to make the guidelines you want and to make the system better. And I think what you said about the psychological aspect of for endometriosis patients, I think it's really sad, and we also see that in Norway a lot. And our association is contacted by a lot of patients and also parents to patients, and we have heard about like young girls down to 13 years old, for 14 years old, that's been have contacted their doctor for menstrual pain, and their parents gone with them, and what they get is like a referral to a psychologist or something like this, for children's psychologist, for help with anxiety. And it's so sad because from such a young age, if you're being put in that box, like it's psychological, it can affect your whole life. And what that patient maybe needed was help with menstrual pain. And that could have changed things a lot. And to know that you might have an endometriosis disease will also help you cope life better by knowing what's going on with you. And I also think what you said about like excision versus ablation and versus how you diagnose endometriosis is also really interesting, because I hope that we can go away from like having to open people up to diagnose endometriosis, so that when you do surgery, it's to remove the endometriosis and not to just have surgery. And we see that there are some specialists that's really good with ultrasound that can find endometriosis in many cases, but we can't like say, oh, ultrasound is the way to diagnose endometriosis unless people actually know how to do it and do it in a good way. And it's different cases, and it's different places, and it's like it's really like frustrating that there's not just an easy way to diagnose endometriosis in a perfect way. And I think in Norway also we see that we have a lot of people that really want to research on endometriosis and adenomyosis, and that's really, really great. And some really good news for the Norwegian people, and hopefully also for the rest of the world, is if this study will be have good results. It just got like 15 million Norwegian crowns from the government from like a research fund, public research foundation, to study the tissue of endometriosis on like a cell level and gene level, like down to the gene, to see like what's the see how the tissue works, and to also like maybe test out different treatments direct on the tissue. So hopefully one day you can like treat the tissue directly and without treating the whole body. And they also want to look at putting in substance into the patient's body before you go to surgery, so the endometriosis tissue will light up during surgery, so it's easier to find. So they use like cancer research. It's been like big cancer study, so they're going to use like much of the same things into the endometriosis study. So they have already built up like a good base to do this study. So this is really, really interesting, and like hopefully it's going to have good results, because I think it's really interesting, like why does some people have a mild grade of endometriosis, and why do some people have like deep endometriosis? And could you be able to find out beforehand if people will develop deep endometriosis? Is it like a difference to the tissue? How does the tissue, like, to find out all these things about, because I think we, in many cases, treat the problem without finding the cause, and like having more focus on the cause. And I think that's really important. So when this study came, we were like, yes, this can be like groundbreaking, and this could be so important for, yeah, for future patients. And so we're really, really thrilled about that study, and hope that it's gonna be good, and hope that they will get more funding, because it's so interesting. Yeah. And they're gonna also like, I think they're also gonna collect like menstrual blood to see like when they study both things, can they see something similar? Can they like uh I'm not like, so I'm not a researcher, so maybe don't arrest me if I say it wrong, but like when they studied the endometriosis tissue and on like a cell and gene level, like when they study the genes, can they find some of it in the menstrual blood, kind of so it's if they could like see some correlation between these things, that maybe they can have a easier way to diagnose endometriosis, but you can't just study the menstrual blood, you can't just study the tissue from the uterus. You have to actually study the real endometriosis tissue, because we do know it has some similarities, as you said, but it's so different also. And what's so fascinating about endometriosis that it can create its own blood vessels, its own nerves and all this stuff. It's not just menstrual blood going out from uterus into your pelvis. So but it's such a so fascinating tissue, and such a fascinating disease. So I'm like, why doesn't more people want to research on this? Because I find it really interesting, but yeah.
Certainly become my special interest as well over the last, 7 years or so, 7 or 8 years. People just think about endometriosis as like an endometrioma, or they think about it affecting their fertility. They think about the uterus a lot, even though by definition it's found outside the uterus. They don't think about lung collapses. They don't think about the fact that endometriosis has nodules, plaques, lesions. They're all different entities, different, and then you have different colors. There's actually at least 10 or so different colors to endometriosis. And depending on their age, chronological age, they're a different color. And the darker it is, the longer it's been in your body. You're right. It's fascinating, and it's certainly fascinating to me. So when we say endometriosis, it's so many different things. So yes, we need studies on all of the above, and yes, we need a control to be menstrual blood if we're going to once and for all throw out retrograde menstruation, at least out of our guidelines, at least out of our guidelines. So that's that. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on that you mentioned is with the ultrasound. Yes, imaging is certainly important, and I believe in pre-surgical mapping. Now, I would prefer that it's not just a transvaginal ultrasound. So my obturator fossa, my sciatic endo is not going to be seen, and wasn't, same with the thoracic, seen on a transvaginal ultrasound. So it doesn't matter how good of an ultrasound technician you are. It doesn't matter what AI, artificial intelligence, you're using to read those ultrasounds, as is being a lot of money being poured into that in Australia as well. And certainly Australia is part of the diagnosis is therapy crew that says all you need is a transvaginal ultrasound. If there's endo on the transvaginal ultrasound, take these meds. If there's not, take these meds. Maybe if you really need some sort of surgery, you might get something, but you're certainly going to have most likely repeat surgeries and continuing issues. So glad that you touched on all of that, because it's extremely important. So what I also wanted to ask you, when you were also talking about how these experts in the courtroom were twisting and, changing information about like your own information, your own medical information, your own life, and taking your narrative and kind of twisting it into something else. So I want to touch on that and wonder if you have anything further you might want to kind of touch on how that was for you, like being in, like what did they say, what were some of those things? So that's one question. And then the other question I want to kind of ask in unison with this is, we don't live in a vacuum. We have partners, fiancés, mothers, fathers, etc. And those people come on this journey with us, whether they want to or not, and whether we want them to or not. So can you tell me how it's been for your loved ones and the people that know you to watch you go through that process? And maybe as a third question to wrap it all up, we mentioned gaslighting in the medical system. We mentioned you being basically gaslit in the court system as well. How have people reacted? Just general people, have people reacted to the fact that you took on the government because of what has happened to you? So I know that's a lot of questions in one. We'll see if you remember any of them.
I'm going to see if I remember them all, but the first one was about like the psychological aspect in the courtroom, and how I felt, as you said, and as I said before, that they twist and turn everything. And also, you used the word narrative, and that's also something that a government's lawyer said, like she created a narrative about her being blah 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 blah, and and I was like sitting there, Jesus, before you did say that it must have been so terrible for me to have had painful menstruations over so many years, but then it wasn't like the discussion was it just painful menstruation or endometriosis, and so it was conflicting what she said, but she specifically used the word that I created a narrative. And I was like, oh God. And I've had one referral in my patient journal to a psychologist, which didn't really say so much in the patient journal. And they read it up in court, just to read it up, although it wasn't like relevant for my endometriosis case. And when I chose to seek someone to talk to, process everything, I went private. I didn't go in the public system. And so it wasn't like anything they could twist and turn about that, but they just read it up. And I do know from other cases that they do twist and turn. They use your patient journal from, if you've been to a psychologist or stuff like that, and they will try to, twist the narrative. And I don't know how it is in every case, but I do know what you're saying about it being put on your childhood. And I have a lot of friends. I do know a lot of people through my position in the Endometriosis Association who also had experienced that. And it's not okay because, yeah, even though some people have had like false diagnosis or something like that, psychological diagnosis. I don't know how to say it good in English, but and some people do have like different diagnosis, and no matter what diagnosis you have, you should have the right to get proper health care. If you have pain, you should get help for your pain. It's like it doesn't matter what other diagnosis you have. Maybe it will be like more difficult if it's about birth control. Maybe you can get depressed or something like that. You have to think about other things. But I think the most important thing in when you come to a doctor and it's difficult with the diagnosis and imaging, you can take different types of images like a pre diagnosis, but unless the endometriosis is like bigger or deep, it's difficult to see. So then it's so important with the conversation that the doctors have with the patient, that they listen, that they really listen to the patient's symptoms, and that they're like curious, ask more questions, and that's also something I really hope we can get in our national guidelines. Like, what's the doctor supposed to ask for? What's the doctor supposed to be like mapping with the patient? Do they have like pain when they poop or urinate or all those different things that they need to like figure out? And if a patient comes to you with really big pain and you can't find anything in imaging, then maybe you should make them refer the patient to a specialist. And in Norway, we have a word called like co-selection. In Norway, we call it samvalg, when the patient should have something to say about the treatment they're getting. So they should like be maybe presented different types of options, and they can choose what's best suited for them, like based on preferences, based on different things. If you're like athlete, that's living a really high active life, or if you're like more home staying, you can't go to work, you can't you will probably need different type of treatment. So it's like to have the patient to have something to say, and this is so important, and the doctor to listen to this. My journey has affected my family in a big degree. My mom and my sister was sitting in court for all of the days, and they were like seeing my mom's face when this government twisted and turned everything. She was like heartbroken. And she also witnessed the first day, at the end of the first day. So she was like heartbroken because she's been with me the whole way. She made sure I got to school. When I couldn't, she stayed home with me from work when I was sick and I couldn't go to school or couldn't be alone. If it wasn't for my mom, I don't know where I would be, because she, helped me pull through everything. And also my sister, like coming with me to the toilet, holding my head when I'm almost fainting. So it's like I've had so much support from my sister and my mom. And now I have a family. I have two boys and I have my boyfriend. And of course, when I'm sick, everything affects him. He has to do more home. I might have to say, you know what, I just have to lay on the couch now. I can't do anything. I'm in pain. There's always something with me. There's always something happening, and I can't be like the mom I want to be. I can't be as playful. I can't be, so involved in the way I wish I could be. Of course, I'm very much involved, but I wish I had more energy to play around and lift them up and the things they want to do. So that's difficult, and also it's difficult with this whole court thing taking much time. My boyfriend has been really great, like letting me sit and work at the evenings, like getting the boys to bed so I can work like to try to prepare myself for the court. And so I've been having a lot of support from my family and friends. But I guess it's the most important people for me in through the years has been the people closest to me, like the really closest to me. That's seen how I am and helped me through it and supported me. Really, I feel really lucky because not everybody has that support and are standing alone in all this shit, if that's allowed, if I'm allowed to say that. And that makes me really sad to think about. And that's why you have to have the public health care in order, so people who struggle with this doesn't get like more things put on you. And that's also been really great with the support I've been getting from people I don't know. I've been getting so many luck wishes, so many supportive messages, and like people rooting for me and yeah, congratulating me, and donating money to the GoFundMe thing so I can take it to court. And the thing is that if I win, all the money goes to the Endometriosis Association, so we can work for use it. So that's like I don't want the money to go to the government. I want it to go to the to our association so we can do more work. So I feel like when I won, it wasn't like, oh, I won. I felt like we won. It was like a collective victory. So it was like I've been feeling so much warmth and love and support, and I'm really, really grateful for that. Although many endometriosis patient histories are similar, it's not the same because my case is different from someone else's case. So if someone else took their case to court, it could be a totally different thing, but I think it's the fact that we've felt so unheard over so many years, uh, in so many instances, and now this is taken to court, and to get like the verdict and to win, it's like we feel heard. I think a lot of people feel heard, that endometriosis is taken seriously, that it's not like, oh, they don't care about us even in that system. So it's like it's sort of a validation. I think since it's the first case, it's also really important for endometriosis patients, and I think it's to me it's like so, and I also think to others that it's so basic. It's about like getting good healthcare and be able to expect getting good healthcare. And if you don't get it, you have the right for compensation. And the fact that you have the right for compensation will maybe make people change their practice, make the healthcare system change a bit. So I think that's why it's really important, and that's why people's been so supportive. So I basically only received love and support from people I even don't know. So it's been really, really great.
So, really wonderful to hear that it's been nothing but positive feedback. And
Oh, I totally forgot. I did forget, but it's like I can't take it seriously, so that's why I've just pushed it away. Because under the newspapers, when they write an article about me, they put it on Facebook, and then people comment, and most of it is like supportive, and then there's like one guy saying something, oh, this person is so stupid, or it's not serious, so you can't like even bother. So it's been like maybe one or two or three of that. And I also got a letter in my mailbox, and that was a bit like creepy. It didn't say they were going to kill me, but were trying to make me wrote like, you should kill yourself, and I know where you can do it. But in those cases, it has to be like psychiatry involved with people doing this. It's not healthy people. And I also think like, okay, if that's what you want to focus on, fine, but then you haven't understood what I'm doing, because I'm trying to change the system for the better. I'm trying to make the system so your taxes don't go to sick women, so it goes to other things. So I'm trying to change the system so more people can stay in work, so more people get the right healthcare they need. So it's like they're, yeah, I forgot that. Sorry, but it's like it's so it doesn't touch on something. It's serious to do this. So of course we went to the police station and said, "Hey, look what I got." Just so if other people in Norway get this kind of letters, maybe you can do something about it. And but I think it doesn't touch on a serious like subject to discuss. It's not like how can I say it? If I would get critique from for something I say, for something people think I said in the wrong way, I would of course try to reflect on it. Have I said something stupid? Have I done should I change my mind on this, or should I, have a good discussion about it, like if it's constructive? But this was just, yeah. But so apart from that, it's been only positive.
Okay, so firstly, apart from pretty much the death threat, pretty much, super traumatic that you've buried deep down, apart from that, the other thing I want to highlight is you're being so nonchalant about the fact that someone knew where you lived. And I'm really sorry you went through that, Elisabeth. That is horrifying. And it is scary that advocates have to deal with this, and because advocates a lot of the time are patients, we're dealing with our disease, we're dealing with comorbidities, we're dealing with side effects of medications, we're dealing with iatrogenic effects of both surgeries and medications, and then you have people come along and encourage you to unalive yourself. No, no. So I'm really sorry you went through that. But let's go back to more positive things, which is yes, we won, Elisabeth, because that's how I felt when I heard your story. It was like your winning team. Like, men might think of, or whatever, people that enjoy football might think, your football team won. But this is so much deeper. This is deeper. It's deeper than being, like a nationalist and your country wins at something. This is ingrained in your body. This disease is deeply, if I can say, infiltrating every aspect of our life, our sex lives, our, therefore romantic and love life and everything else, our family, our ability to produce children, if we choose to and if we'd like to, our ability not to have iatrogenic effects after cancer drugs are fed to us as treatments. Just to wrap up, what would you have done differently throughout this whole journey, if there is anything? What do you think our listeners and viewers can take away from listening to your story?
I wish I believed myself a bit more. I wish I had more confidence in what I felt, and that I didn't believe the doctors when I said everything was normal. And that I maybe would have changed doctors, tried more doctors until I got an answer, got a referral to a gynecologist. But I couldn't because I didn't have more information. If I could change anything, it would be that, to get help earlier. What we often recommend to the patients contacting us is to write like symptom journal for themselves. Like, how do you feel? How does it affect your life? Did you have to stay home from school? Don't just write like menstrual pain, but also describe how it affects you. And when you're going to the doctor, show it to the doctor, because then it's so much more visible for the doctor how affected you are. I wish I did have the power to believe myself more back then. And also, I wish I gotten someone to talk to maybe a bit sooner, because it's a lot of feelings with getting a chronic sickness. It's a lot of feelings if you've been gaslighted. It's a lot of things that needs to be processed, and also to get the help to and learn how to live my life with a chronic sickness. And also, I would have gotten the lawyer help much earlier in the process. That's like contact a lawyer. I know it costs money, but you just get the first evaluation, and to maybe get like a support letter in if you're gonna apply for compensation or something like that. Like, contact a lawyer. That would be my advice. Yes.
So finally, I just want to ask Elisabeth, where to from here for you?
I'm waiting to see if the government appeal the verdict, and if I have to go another round in court. And if that happens, it's going to be a lot of work with that to build our case even more solid. But then we're going to just, yeah, and get ready to do what we can to win again. But I'm like, I work in the Endometriosis Association in Norway now, and I find that works really, really giving to me. It's like I said before, it's so good to put the negative into something positive and to work for change and to collaborate with so many people who's also so engaged in this work. So I find that as a gift. And then it's just, spend time with my family and friends and try to be the best mom I can be and try to have as good as health I can for my children. That's like my main priorities now. Obviously, my family comes first always, but yeah, just believe in yourself, and if you feel like you're not getting heard in the meeting with a doctor, just don't give up and believe in your own worth and that you deserve a good healthcare.
Well, Elisabeth Raasholm Larby from Norway, thank you so much for spending time with us today on the Invisible Iconic podcast. You are a powerhouse. You are, I don't like saying inspiration within the context of chronic, disease and endometriosis, because you do find a lot of, they call it inspiration porn within this community, where it's like, oh, you're doing so great. Like, and we wish we weren't in this situation. We wish we didn't have to choose between surviving or, being stuck in the abyss. But of course we can say that you are an inspiration, because you took on an entire country, essentially. You took on an entire government, you took on Goliath, and you won. So for that, we all applaud you. And yes, we won, because you won for all of us who are, in similar situations and who are being gaslit. So again, from the bottom of my heart, it was so lovely to meet you. And thank you so, so much, Elisabeth Raasholm Larby.
Thank you for having me.